was. I mean, and so in this journey, in your book, you begin a healing process. Once you have identified the obstacles, and you know, in terms of summarizing the book, it really isn't fair. People need to read it. But when did the healing part begin for you?
Well, I think first of all, I wrote the book takes place on two different levels, and it reads like a novel, although it's a true story. And one of the reasons I wrote the book in that manner is to draw readers into the adoptee's unique struggle for identity. So in the book, I talk about my life's experiences from the age 5 to 35, but also, more importantly, I wanted to give the reader a sense of what I was feeling and thinking. And I think for a guy, I'm pretty in touch with what I feel and think. So
yeah, it's easy to read book. I got it.
I'm a man of the 90s.
There you go.
But for me, I always felt like I didn't belong, that I wasn't good enough, that no matter what I did, it would never be good enough just to put me on equal footing with others. And I had a great deal of emotional insecurity, and I just didn't feel like I belonged. I thought that by finding my birth mother, she would wave her magic wand and relieve me of all my insecurities. Well, that's an impossible expectation to put on any person. When I met my mother, that did not happen.
Well, and if I can ask too, I was discussing this with my the woman who does my hair and makeup. She always asks important questions, and one of the things she asked was, because this issue came up, if you're carrying this fantasy for so long, it must be very hard, even if intellectually I had said to you before you met her, now you realize this probably isn't going to make it all better. Emotionally, it would be very hard to hear that, wouldn't it? I mean, you'd almost have to see her and experience it.
That's a very good point.
Okay.
Very good point. And I was fortunate to meet my birth mother when I was 22 years old.
Okay.
The healing that I expected did not take place. So I thought romantic relationships with women would take care of it. And of course, it did not. And what I found myself doing with women who I truly loved is I would push them away because I was afraid that I would be hurt and that they would leave me. I served in Germany during the Cold War as an Army officer, and I was very idealistic, and I thought by pursuing this virtuous task in life that would heal me, and of course it didn't. And I tried to reconnect with my German heritage. When I lived in Germany for 3 years in my 20s, I spoke it nearly fluently, dated German women, drove a German car, had German friends. What I found was I could not reconnect to my culture of origin, and that bothered me. I have an American mentality, but a German heart. So by searching outside of myself, I was never able to make myself complete and deal with my emotional insecurities. And what happened to me, like my birth parents, is I became alcoholic and bottomed out on alcohol. In fact, was administratively discharged from the Army as a captain for failure to respond to alcohol rehabilitation.
Okay.
That's when the healing started, when I had nowhere else to go and knew not what to do. And
does it sound like you tried an array of things?
Right. And I think for me, there's definitely a spiritual component, and when I had reached my bottom, the loving hand of God reached down and pulled me out of that chaos and misery. And I was able to come into a group of people who don't drink anymore also, and they showed me a different way to live a day at a time. And when I began focusing on what I can do, and turn my energy and attention inward on trying to live my life as best I could a day at a time, to treat other people with respect, and to find a God of love. That's when I started to heal.
Okay. So really, like a lot of us, I mean, we are often catapulted into healing by pain. And it sounds like yours just sort of added and added and added for you. I'm curious about when you were in Germany and you were driving German cars and hanging out with German friends. You said you have a German heart and American mentality. How long did it take you to figure that out?
That was part of my recovery process, is to come to terms with that.
And why are those things separate? I mean, why is there conflict between those things?
That's a very difficult question, and I try to answer it.
In a sentence, Peter.
Yeah. Gosh, Mary, you're being very tough on me tonight. But that's something I tried to really talk about in the book, is what it's like to grow up in a different culture, in a foreign country. And, you know, the Native Americans understand this.
Yeah. But it sounds like the mindset is different enough, profoundly different enough, that would have created that level of conflict.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, and also I would like to say to this, that part of my journey, my inner journey, has to been to look and see if the glass is half full or half empty. And what I found today is that it is more than half full. And international adoption for me was a very traumatic experience growing up and followed me into my adulthood. But what I learned today is to look at the benefits and the positives that come with it. I was adopted by a very loving American couple who gave me many rewards, one of which was the gift of education. And I grew up here in the United States where there is more freedom than in any other country in the world. And when you combined education with nearly unlimited freedom, it creates opportunities.
Yes.
One of those opportunities was to be able to write a book and to appear on your show tonight.
Okay. So the part of healing is saying, you know, let's take a look at the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I imagine, you know, and I know there are very likely people watching tonight who have considered international adoption. And what I hear from you is that it's not maybe that is always the worst idea in the world, but you need to have a lot of things in mind before you make that decision, because it's going to have a serious impact.
Correct.
On that child. And it sounds like being familiar with the language and the culture would be an enormous benefit.
Absolutely.
To that child.
Absolutely.
I mean, the ability to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
You know.
I'd also like to mention an organization for parents who are considering adoption, who have adopted, for birth parents, for adoptees, for professionals associated with adoption. There is an organization called the American Adoption Congress. It's an educational organization, and it seeks to educate people on all aspects of adoption. Their headquarters is in Washington, D.C., and if people would like more information, I'd like to give that phone number.
Sure, go ahead.
The telephone number of the American Adoption Congress is 202-483-3399.
Okay. All right, so it's in Washington, D.C., the American
Adoption
Congress.
Right.
Okay. In terms of your search, how many international adoptees have you met?
Since writing my book, I've met many, many. And I've received, one of the nice things about being an author is people write you letters.
Yes, they do.
And I've had many German-born adoptees say that my struggle with my identity and my desire to return to Germany is something that they've experienced also, as well as many Korean-born adoptees now who are entering into their 20s and 30s. So.
Yeah, it's like one of the things when I was looking is this issue of interracial or intercultural families, and I guess I'm wondering, because I don't really remember, did your adoptee parents also have other children?
I have one younger adopted sibling.
Okay, and that child was also adopted?
Out of a German orphanage also,
okay.
at the age of 6 months.
Okay.
Correct. And what the research shows is that female adoptees are 4 times as likely to search as compared to male adoptees.
Wow.
Well, she and I are just exactly opposite.
Okay.
So
she hasn't searched?
she has. The only time she thought about searching is she was having medical problems and wanted to find her birth family to see if there was any genetic linkages to some of her ailments.
Okay. So when you talk about this with her, does she identify with some of your concerns? Has her experience been very different?
Well, hers is different, and one of the reasons I count that too is she was adopted at 6 months of age, and I was adopted at nearly 3.
Yeah.
And the research shows that if the younger one is adopted, the less trauma there is likely to be suffered.
Okay.
But it's possible to overcome it, and that's one of the messages I really want to share with your viewers who may be listening tonight, that inherent sense of intense loneliness that took me to a lot of places that I am glad I'm no longer at. It's possible to move through that as it is. It's possible to live and move through alcoholism.
Okay.
And not drink.
So, and it sounds like part of the key for both of those things has to do with community and connection and maybe a spiritual identification. At this, did your parents?
You should be a therapist.
Hey, how about another job? Did your parents read your book?
My adoptive father passed away before the book, and no, my adoptive mother has not read it.
She has not read it.
No, and you know, one of the reasons many Americans seek to adopt overseas is that they are very threatened by the idea of the birth mother may one day desire to come and take the birth child away. And there's been some sensational cases here in the United States where that has happened, and the likelihood of that happening with international adoption is much less because you have the protection of the United States government as well as the distance factor. But
that's a very good point. Because, you know, yeah, we've had other shows where we've talked about that. In fact, we had a show where with Terry, and she had her friend with her who actually is a birth mother, whose child found her, and what that was like. In terms of there was a, motivation, that's what I was going to ask you. You mentioned rescuing. In terms of, because you see, particularly in war-torn countries, you see people who want to go in and adopt all the refugee children, and just like children born here in America, I mean, they're going to have, after you've been through war, you've been through violence, you've been through trauma, I mean, there's going to be some special needs.
Absolutely.
You've seen your parents blown up. There's going to be a real struggle there that I wonder if the adopted parents are really aware is going to be a reality.
That's correct, and arguing against international adoption, it would be unfair for me to do that unless I provided an alternative. And there are two that I'd like to mention on your show.
Okay.
The first is the United Nations Children's Fund, which seeks to help children who are abandoned, neglected, and abused in countries where there is civil strife and where there is tremendous economic poverty. What the United Nations Children's Fund does is it provides resources to communities and families so that they can care for their own.
Okay.
Another organization I'd like to mention is World Vision, which is an international partnership of Christians. It's the largest development and relief Christian organization in the world, and it helps, it's active in over 100 countries. World Vision is not an adoption agency, and it does not facilitate adoptions. What it does is it helps children become productive citizens in their own countries through child sponsorship programs.
Oh, okay.
Both of these organizations are very concerned that the child remain within their community, within their culture, and that their ethnic and language ties be preserved. What they also say is that in some cases international adoption is the only alternative, but first they seek to have the child raised by the family. If that's not possible, by the community. If that's not possible, then domestic adoption, and only as a last resort, international adoption.
Okay. In other countries, and this may be also a very large question because we only have a minute, but, do other countries adopt children at the same rate that the U.S. does?
The United States is the largest single importer of children from overseas countries.
Okay. And even domestically? Is it part of other cultures, their actual culture to adopt? I mean, we'll take one country. How about Germany? Do Germans have the same amount of internal adoption that we do in the U.S.?
I cannot answer that
Okay.
question.
Yeah, I knew that might be a large one, but I was just curious in terms of culturally how those things compare. Because you're saying one of the solutions is internal adoption, domestic adoption. So I was just curious about that. Well, that's another show. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close. I want to thank you for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
In the upcoming 2 weeks, we'll be airing the last 2 shows of our 3-year run. It is time for a holiday. I'm tired. Be sure and tune in for the next few episodes. We're going to take a hiatus at that point, and hopefully we'll be back. Take care. Good night.
For topic suggestions, write to Bay Area Psychology at 1723 Hamilton Avenue, Suite A, San Jose, California 95125, or call at 408-448-0333.